Today, we're playing with modern blue-white control, but this isn't any normal list. We're playing with 4 Cryptic command, and the deck dominates.
This gotta be real big. I gotta make it just for my kids and for their kids' kids. That's wealth years and years. Promise my brother soon as he out and finish this bid, we finna do it bigger than anybody ever did. The odds is real big, jobs that's real big. Satan trying a little, my God is real big. Stayed up on the grind on the cards is real big. I gotta do it big, the only way that I can live.
Today we're playing a Magic Online League. For those who don't know, it's 5 rounds of competitive Magic, and if you go 5-0 or 4-1, you get decent prizes. Let's get into this. Starting round 1, we keep a somewhat risky hand, but we're on the draw, and we're here to cast some Cryptic command, so come on, let's keep it. We draw a Hollow Fountain off the top, which is nice, so let's play our fetch land and say go. Our opponent fetches a Cinderglade on our end step, so it's clear that they are a Valakut deck. They untap, explore, and play a Valakut. Here we can fetch a Triome, and we can play our land holding up Counterspell. Our opponent untaps and casts 2 Explores, however misses their 5th land drop and passes. Maybe if there was someone else, they would have hit it. 2 Explores. Anyways, we draw an Archmage's Charm, but I still want to hold up Counterspell, so let's play our Triome and pass, so we have 4 untapped mana next turn. Our opponent plays a Dwarven Mine and a Chalice of the Void on 2. I choose not to counterspell this card, as we have Cryptic command to bounce it, and then we can use Teferi Hero of Dominaria to plus and hold up Counterspell on turn 5. Our opponent untaps, casts a Dryad, so let's use our Cryptic command like we planned to. Drawing an Archmage's Charm doesn't change the fact that this Teferi Hero of Dominaria is getting onto the table. What is interesting though is from our plus, we draw a Chalice of the Void. I think here it's smart to play Chalice on 0, as most red-green lists do play Summoner's Pact. Our opponent casts the Chalice of the Void again, but it's still not a threat to us and we have many ways to remove it, so let's leave it on the table. Fortunately, we draw Teferi Time Raveler. Let's bounce the Chalice, play our land, and hold up Archmage's Charm and Counterspell after the Teferi untap. Our opponent plays another mountain, casts a Dryad, so we counterspell it. With no other spell on the stack, we Archmage's Charm and draw 2 on their end step. This game looks over to me. We untap, cast a Wandering Emperor, activate all our Planeswalkers, and pass the turn. Our opponent casts a Primeval Titan, which we obviously counterspell. Currently, our opponent is more dead than the professional Magic the Gathering scene. Drawing a Fire Ice, we activate all our Planeswalkers again and attack. On our end step, our opponent makes a fatal play that could lose us the game. They fetch a Dwarven Mine, creating a 1/1. Our opponent untaps, casts 2 spells, surprisingly we counter both of them, and untap. We start the turn by ultimating Teferi, then we start drawing cards and exiling lands. On our opponent's upkeep, we decide to ice their only green source to make their life a lot harder. Our opponent concedes the game. Sideboarding, it is clear to see what to bring in, however taking things out is more difficult. I don't like to keep in removal for the Dryads as we have Aether Gusts and we're normally just going to counter them anyways. Chalice of the Void is not good because they are even playing Chalice themselves. Timeless Dragon is very slow and doesn't even block the Titan. In game 2 we keep a land heavy hand, but a Spreading Seas and a Teferi Time Raveler is good enough in this matchup. Our opponent leads with a fetch land Cinderglade and we draw a land. Let's play our Colonnade and say go. With an Explorer and 2 mountains, it's clear that we can try and mana score our opponent by putting the Spreading Seas on their green source. Our opponent plays another mountain, so it's clear that we're mana scoring them, and they play a Chalice on 2, which we can bounce with the Teferi. We draw a nice Aether Gust, so let's play the Teferi, bounce the Chalice, and see what they do. Our opponent finds a green source and plays a Dryad of the Elysian Grove. Here we untap and we draw a Spreading Seas. I think the plan is simple, let's Aether Gust the Dryad and let's also get rid of the green source. However, something interesting happens here. Our opponent floats green mana in response to the Spreading Seas, implying that they have a Veil of Summer, so we should keep this in mind for later turns. Luckily, the Teferi is saving us from that. In their draw step, I Aether Gust the Dryad to stop them from having good mana. Our opponent plays a Chalice on 2 and a Red and 6, which is annoying and we need to deal with both of them. Drawing a Fire Ice, I decide to Prismatic Ending the Chalice of the Void. This means that I can ice their only green source on their upkeep, stopping both Primeval Titan and Scapeshift being cast. This gives me more time to use my Snapcaster Mage. Drawing a land is unfortunate, but our opponent untaps and casts a Primeval Titan, which we can Aether Gust. We draw a counterspell and I'm deep in the tank, but our opponent decides to concede. I'll take the win. On to the next round. For round 2, we mulligan our 7 on the draw, but we have a nice removal heavy hand with the Chalice of the Void on 6. I'll keep this and bottom a land. Our opponent leads with a Steam Vent and a Mishra's Bauble, instantly putting me to sleep because I know that they're on Murktide and I'm about to be really bored. However, luckily we untap and we draw Teferi Time Raveler, which obviously is going to crush them, and they know we have it, so they're going to be salty. Anyways, we play our land and say go. After waking up from a quick nap, our opponent plays a land and passes the turn, obviously holding up a counterspell. We fetch a Triumph, untap, and play the Chalice of the Void. We want to cast a must counter here, as they know we have the Teferi Time Raveler, and we want to force them to use all the counterspells in their hand. Don't forget, they only play so many counters in their deck, let's make them use it. Our opponent plays their land and passes again. As I really don't want them to draw 2 cards with Archmage's Charm here, I'm going to force them to either have the counter or the removal spell. To no one's surprise, they have a Spell Pierce, and they untap and cast a Dragon Rage Channeler. We draw a Colonnade, which is really nice because we are playing a draw-go plan against them right now, so let's try and Prismatic Ending their Channeler, bait out a counterspell so that then we can Verdict. Unfortunately, they let the Prismatic Ending resolve, but that's okay, let's keep hitting our land drops. Our opponent just draws and says go. This benefits us, we have a load of creature lands. Confusing me even more, they do nothing again, so I'll just keep hitting my land drops. Interestingly, we draw Teferi Hero of Dominaria. I wasn't planning on casting it, but my opponent casts a Dress Down. Now they could have another Spell Pierce, but in actuality, I want to eat an Unholy Heat here, so that my Hall of the Storm Giants is even harder to kill. They do take the bait, they untap and cast a Ragavan. However, I'm going to try and stick to the plan here of attacking with Hall of Storm Giants, as don't forget they are only on 15 life, and one of their lands deals themselves damage. My opponent bolts my face, untaps, and gets in with the Ragavan. Hoping they missed the trigger like your local FNM warrior, I realize that this is Magic Online and that can't happen. They flip over a Cryptic command but choose not to cast it. Instead, they play a Murktide Regent, which we have the answer for in the form of Supreme Verdict. I'm feeling really good about this spot. Like any other threat-light deck, our opponent untaps and doesn't have a threat to cast, so they pass the turn and we have Hall of Storm Giants available to us. As the creature land has ward, there's really nothing they can do unless they have Brazen Borrow in the deck, so they concede. Boarding in this matchup, I like to take out all the clunky spells. Sadly, that's 4 Cryptic Command and 2 Counterspell. We are bringing in 2 Mystical Dispute, which is a nice swap for Counterspell, as I hate flooding on Counterspell effects in the deck that plays cheaper Counterspells than us. I really like this hand game too. We're on the draw, have an answer for Ragavan, and can counter a card like Murktide Regent, Ledger Shredder, or Expressive Iteration from our opponent. I'm really confused by the hand that they've kept, as they cast essentially nothing for the first few turns. This to me means that their hand is full of counterspells, and we're going to lean in more on our creature lands again this game. With a Dragon Rage Channeler being put on the battlefield, there's no real other option than to Prismatic Ending and counter back if they have a counterspell. This keeps the board clear, makes it so that they have to act on us, as we're just hitting our land drops and leaning in on our creature lands. Our opponent does nothing again, and I top deck a Teferi Time Raveler. Let's use one of these to eat a counterspell, as I don't want them to cast Archmage's Charm. A whole load of nothing starts to happen. They do nothing, we do nothing, but then they have an Archmage's Charm. As this game proceeds to send me to sleep because they go back to doing nothing again, we continue to hit our land drops after drawing a Solitude. I think it's quite clear that we're in a great position here. It's very hard for them to kill Hall of the Storm Giants because it's a 7/7 with Ward 3, so they need 2 burn spells and 6 mana on top of that to kill it. Having flashbacks from game 1, we keep on hitting our land drops and we keep attacking with our creature. Not really much to discuss here. I make a somewhat risky attack into this Dragon Rage Channeler, as they could have a removal spell on top of blocking, however I'm willing to take that risk and they don't have it. This game is really displaying that if you just attack with your creature land, sometimes you don't need to use the spells in your hand. I'm really sandbagging my resources here for when they have to tap out to answer my creature. Now we have a very interesting turn here. We do have a lot of mana on top of activating the Hall. I decided to go with the Relic because I believe that they want to get a Murktide Regent on the table to block the Hall, as it would be an 8/8, and if it resolves then it's very annoying for the opponent to do this. So the Relic resolves, I attack with the Hall of Storm Giants, and they have an Otawara. We haven't played our land this turn, so we can play our Hall tapped and see what they can do on their turn. I go for a Prismatic Ending on the Ragavan just to stop their mana. They cast a Jace the Mind Sculptor. We have to Solitude the Ragavan, so I do it on their upkeep, which means that if they have a Subtlety, I can top the Solitude and then draw a card with Relic to draw another white card. Well, our opponent just scoops it up. On to the next round. After phoning my mother, bragging to her that I just beat Blue-Red Murktide on an online video game, I go into the third round. We keep a nice consistent hand with 3 lands and a load of good spells. Drawing Teferi Time Raveler is nice against blue to Delta, and we're setting up here for a turn 2 ice. With both of us playing the same lands, it's safe to assume that we're playing the mirror, especially with the Cycled Dragon. We ice them on their upkeep, and we both keep hitting our land drops. I decide not to ice them again, as they could have a Teferi Time Raveler, which I wouldn't be able to counter. Our opponent cycles Shark Typhoon on our end step and untaps. They play a tap land pre-combat and attack with Shark. This actually lets us flash in the Wandering Emperor, as if they counterspell the Wandering Emperor, they can't play Teferi Time Raveler, and if they don't counter the Wandering Emperor, then I'll wait till their end step so that I can exile the Shark on their end step, so that I can make a token instead if they make a Teferi Time Raveler on the table. That was complicated, hope it makes sense. Anyways, for some odd reason they decide to counter so we can untap and punish them with Teferi Time Raveler, and they don't even have another counterspell, so now we can just bounce and hold up a counterspell of our own. This is gonna snowball. Get that shit out of here. Anyways, they untap and cast a Solitude, we'll get that shit out of there as well. Let's just clean up, we're a janitor. For those who play on paper and really love to BM, I've seen a lot of players at GPs actually play with their hand revealed when the control player is so far ahead. Just reveal all your counterspells, show your opponent that you have it all, and make them feel more pain. Anyways, we can't do that on Magic Online, let's enjoy killing them with Cryptic commands. Yep, we have a second one. This game is literally over. I'm not really sure what combination of draws they could have. I think it involves multiple Veil of Summers in the main. There's not much to sideboarding in this matchup, just get those 3 Chalice of the Voids out of here. Relic for Snapcaster Mage and Disputes for their blue spells. Not too complicated. Being on the draw game too, we mulligan a clunky 7 and keep a decent 6. Similar to most control mirrors, my opponent and I just keep hitting our land drops and say go, and we ice them on our turn too. Having no counterspells in my hand, I decide to go for the mid-range strategy of just cast everything in my hand every single turn. Oh shit. Okay, we draw an Archmage's Charm, which is nice, it's a castable, so let's draw 2 cards and see what we can hit. Our opponent misses their 4th land drop and they ice us on our upkeep, so let's get this Wandering Emperor down and pressure the Teferi. We draw our own Teferi, which I'm going to cast, but confusingly, our opponent flashes in Snapcaster Mage in response to the Teferi, but still decides to counterspell. What's going on in their head? Anyways, this is a simple punish. Let's fire, ping the Snapcaster, ping the Teferi, and make a 2/2 so they can't bounce it. Opponent has ending for the token, we untap, and we draw a Prismatic Ending, so we're obviously going to cast it. However, sadly, the opponent has another Snapcaster Mage and another counterspell. The only line is to make a 2/2 here, as they would just attack it with Snapcaster anyways. Our opponent does nothing and we attack the Teferi. They cycle Shark Typhoon to block, and we have a choice between Supreme Verdict and Teferi Hero. This is our only real chance to tuck the Teferi Time Raveler, so I'm going to take this opportunity. Our opponent makes a massive punt here and attacks both creatures at Teferi Hero. You'll see why later on in the game. We draw an Archmage's Charm and I want to be patient with the Supreme Verdict, as we could steal the Shark to block the Snapcaster Mage, and I want to counter the Teferi Time Raveler. We fire the clip and cast the Verdict. Our opponent untaps and attacks with their creature land. This is going to be a close game. As I'm going to play the Teferi next turn, I flash in the Snapcaster Mage to present a chump blocker. Interestingly, we draw Cryptic Command. This changes my mind as I want to bounce draw the land with Mystical Dispute backup to cantrip into more interaction. I have a bowl of fish and chips in front of me. I need some salt to go along with it. Let's play the Teferi Hero. We draw a land so we can attack with the Snapcaster Mage and have ice plus double dispute up on their creature land. They do have an ice on our end step, but we still have a single dispute and an ice up. You can see what happens, the rest of the gameplay explains itself. And that's how you beat a turn 3 Teferi Time Raveler. In round 4 we keep a nice consistent hand on the play, and we can double ice, double counterspell our opponent. With them leading with a Dwarf in mind, I can safely assume that they're on Indomitable Creativity. I make a mistake being afraid of Wrenn and 6 and I don't cast the Teferi, so my opponent leads with Expressive Iteration, which I have to use my counterspell on. Yep, we miss our land. We ice our opponent on their upkeep and they have another Expressive Iteration. The unlucky F&M Warrior inside me is raging as we miss our 4th land again. We can ice our opponent on their upkeep and hope they have nothing. Nope, they have the Wrenn and 6. This is not looking good for us. If we hit our 4th land now, we can Prismatic Ending the Wrenn and 6 and have Counterspell on their turn, and it's looking decent for us. Nope. As I'm calling Richard Garfield to tell him how bad his video game is, I Prismatic Ending the Wrenn and 6 and they let it resolve. After they get a Teferi on the table, I just rage scoop. We want the Spreading Seas to interact with Dwarven Mine, we want the EEs to destroy all the creatures, the disputes for all their blue spells, and we take out the clunky stuff. Game 2, I am genuinely confused, so I'll fast forward through it. Our opponent keeps a 1-land hand, we have a Spreading Seas, they do nothing, and we win. GG. For game 3, we keep a nice hand on the draw. Got a Spreading Seas and a Prismatic Ending to interact with them, and we just don't want to draw lands. An Explorer is very scary by the opponent, as it lets them cast their expensive things faster, as well as get their combo down. We don't have an option but to Spreading Seas as we whiff on our draw, and we draw 2 lands, which is terrible for us. Teferi Time Raveler comes down, which I'm not too concerned about, as we do have a Prismatic Ending. You kidding me, bro? There isn't really much left to this match, as they have a Teferi Time Raveler on the table and they can combo us, which makes it very hard to do anything. With a Veil of Summer as well as a Prismari command, they're gonna combo. To no one's surprise, it's extremely difficult for me to beat 2 Archons, so I concede the game, on to round 5. Being on the play round 5, we keep an extremely consistent hand and play our land and say go. Unfortunately, we find out that our opponent is on burn. As I believe we're going to curve out with this hand, I decide to counter Lightning Bolt as I just want to use my mana and my spells, as a lot of the time you can die before you can cast things against burn. They have another Lightning Bolt, so we play our land and pass. Gimme that. Who's the burn player now? They suspend a Rift Bolt and pass. We play our land, get in for 1, and I counter the Rift Bolt. Our opponent suspends another one, we draw an ice, so I use it to cantrip. We whiff on our draw drawing a land, so we try to ice them on their upkeep, but they have the Skullcrack. Then we draw a load of blanks, they double suspend Rift Bolt, and we whiff on our draw and lose. In this matchup I take out all the slow cards, and I want Aether Gust for their red spells and Spreading Seas to try and mana screw them. For game 2, we keep a nice hand. We're taking no damage from our lands, and we have a Chalice of the Void, as well as an Archmage's Charm to steal any 1-drop. The only card we're afraid of in this hand is an Eidolon of the Great Revel. Ooh, look at this value! We draw a Spreading Seas, we obviously cast it. Our opponent casts a Roiling Vortex, which is annoying and gets in for 2. Interestingly, we top deck a Prismatic Ending. I don't want to cast it yet, as I want to play patient and steal the Monastery Swiftspear, as I believe that will deal more damage to us in the short term than the Roiling Vortex will. Now we're able to Prismatic Ending the Roiling Vortex, it resolves, and they draw a card on our end step. Our opponent then does nothing. Now they either have a load of 1-drops in hand, or they have 2 mana instants that they're holding up. So I'm going to attack my Swiftspear and hold up my counterspells instead of playing the Teferi. We counter a Boros Charm and they cast a Skullcrack at sorcery speed. Let's snap counterspell this to increase the pressure. We draw a Castle Vantress and I accidentally attack before casting our Teferi, missing a crucial point of damage. Post combat though, we can cast it and bounce the Snapcaster Mage. We draw a Spreading Seas, which allows us to mana screw them off white again. Then we draw an Ice, which we can cast on their upkeep, and they can't do anything in response because of the Teferi, allowing us to keep the pressure on. We start to flood a bit, but we do have the Castle Vantress and the Snapcaster Mage and the Teferi, so there's not much to complain about. Let's keep passing and holding up interaction. With the Charm off the Scry, it's very hard for me to lose this game, so let's keep attacking, keep holding up interaction, and there really isn't anything they can do here. We keep a nice but slow hand game 3, and we're rewarded as they have a Rift Bolt into an Eidolon, which is perfect for this hand. We remove the Eidolon with the Prismatic Ending, and we pass. What's surprising to me is that they have nothing to cast. This implies that their hand is all instants, so when they cast a Lightning Bolt, I'm inclined to cast Aether Gust, as I want to slow down their hand. Our opponent tops the Lightning Bolt, draws a card with their Canyon, untaps, and casts the Lightning Bolt and plays their land. We draw an Aether Gust, so let's start with Spreading Seas. Our opponent then decides to cast Lightning Bolt, which we will gust again, as we are just looking to use our mana and save our life total. Our opponent draws an Eidolon and casts it, and we draw a Solitude. We have an interesting decision to make. Do we play our land or play Solitude, or do we play Wandering Emperor? I went for Wandering Emperor, as if they have Skullcrack, it's less effective against Wandering Emperor, as they're only preventing 2 life rather than 3 from the Solitude. With a land, Teferi, and Archmage's Charm, it's clear that I'm supposed to hold up my counterspells at 10 life. We counter a Lava Spike and untap. Draw a Chalice of the Void, and I'm unsure on whether to play it on 2 or 1. I decide to go for 1 because I do want to have Counterspell as an out on top of the deck, but they punish us with Smash to Smithereens. Our opponent just plays a tap land, so we flash in our Solitude, and they concede the game, going 4-1 with 4 Cryptic command. This deck was sick. If you like this video, then please like and subscribe, as it took over 10 hours to produce, so if you want to see more content like this, you have to support it. Why don't you check this video out, because YouTube thinks you'll like it.
It's gotta be real big. I gotta make it just for my kids and for their kids' kids. That's wealth years and years.